There are almost no silver linings whatsoever to reading books that you hated every single second of. However, one that I can think of that has never failed me before is the opportunity to completely trash talk these books. And that's what I'm going to do. The new year's coming around. I'm just getting ready to film my full 2024 wrap up. I'm getting ready to film my top 5, top 6 books of the year. And I thought, why don't I first and foremost start all of these reviews with the top 6 worst books I read in 2024, because they are the ones that I probably have the most energy for, the most vim for, the most passion for. So, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you the top 6 worst books I've read this year. Well, it's top 5 worst books with a 6 because I just like the ring of 6 more. But that's what we're going to do. This is in no particular order. However, I think I will say... No, actually, it's in no particular order. The first book on this list is a book I wish I could just like turn into a person and just... It's called Girl in Pieces by Kathleen Glasgow. I think it's here. It's right there. It's that book there. I hated every single second of this book. No joke, genuinely turning this page felt like a crime every single time I did it. But I was still in my I don't DNF books era. I have gladly outgrown that era now. And the second I get to a vibe that just feels wrong to me, I am, in fact, closing that book and getting rid of it. But this book was advertised to me, and what I expected of it was a modern Girl Interrupted. And what I received, what I got, what ended up being in my hands was a Manic Pixie Dream Girl fan fiction. Everything about this book sucked. Like, I don't even know how to explain it to you. I just...
Be nice. I'm finding it.
See? Do you know what? I'm gonna try and break it down into different points. First and foremost, I would like to say I am aware that this book is supposed to be in some way or another reflective of the author's personal experience. But some of our personal experiences should stay private. Some of our personal experiences should remain personal experiences. Some of them should stay in the journal. Not everything needs to be publicized. Not everything needs to be public. Not everything needs to be given to the masses to indulge in and consume. You know, all love to you. All power to you. This is your own personal experience. This is what you went through. I respect that. Why did I have to go through it? I read this book saying that it was supposed to make people with a history of, depression, self-harm, harmful coping mechanisms, etc. feel seen, feel important, feel like there is hope out there. It's supposed to make you feel like you understand truly the complexity of what it is that is within these minds, and you come out of it feeling better.
Guys,
that didn't happen. And that's not coming from like a very privileged, I just don't get it, perspective. No, I experienced this stuff as a young teenage girl too. This did not do that. In fact, my diary from when I was 15 might have done better than this book did. This book to me read as a step-by-step manual and a how-to guide on how to do those things. It was a step-by-step guide. It was telling me what materials I needed to use, what technique I needed to use, telling me exactly what it was about this that I craved, what it was about this that I missed. All I could think was, damn, you're kind of selling this to me again. Like, my God, maybe I should go back to all of this. Like, this book was the complete inherent opposite of that. And hey, you can say that it's personal taste. Maybe some people did feel seen. Maybe some people did like it. Me personally, I feel like it should have stayed in the drafts. On top of that, how do I put this? Why am I supposed to be okay with an age gap romance of 10 years when the girl is 17 years old? Why, in what world would I be okay with that? In what world would I pick up this book with a 17-year-old girl and a 27-year-old man and think, this is something I'm interested in. Matter of fact, when's the wedding? This is of interest to me. Are we, in what world would I be okay with that? And put that to the side. Cool, 17, 27. Maybe some people can make peace with that. In the UK, that's technically legal. Put that to the side. He had her running drugs for him.
What's going on?
He had her running drugs for him. He gaslit her. He manipulated her. He saw this fragile, vulnerable, broken young girl who just needed help, who needed to feel seen, who needed to be taken care of. And he thought, I know what I'll do. I'll have her run my drugs for me. There are so many things about this book that I hated. And those are the very few that can come to the top of my mind right now. But I don't want to keep you here for too long. So that's what I'm going to give you. Next is November 9th by Colleen Hoover. And if you've been here since the beginning, you will know that one of my first ever videos was a reading vlog of this book. So you will know all of the feelings and the emotions that I feel in my body about this book. Someone needs to reach out to Colleen Hoover and tell her to stick to the verity style of literature and move away from the ugly love style of literature. You know what I mean? But until then, let's talk about why I hated November 9th as quickly as I can, because I have in fact spoken about this in my Talking Bitter Baking Sweet episode as well as in my November 9th reading vlog. First and foremost, the main male character is supposed to be a writer and a poet. Literally can't write poetry for shit. And I know, poetry is subjective, literature is subjective, art is subjective. But this is objectively bad poetry. Hey, that's my bad. Need I remind you guys of the "she loved me in bold, she saw me in italics"? Do I need to remind you guys of that? I understand the backstory. I got it. I read the backstory. I read the context. I read the character dynamics. I read the plot dynamics. I read all of it and the way that it worked. Still don't really understand why the main male character behaved in the way that he did. To be completely honest with you, still don't understand it. I understand it. I don't really understand it. I understand why the author thinks it makes sense, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it makes justifiable sense. I get it, you did that. I don't really understand how that is a justifiable excuse for the romance to then go back to flourishing and blossoming. That doesn't make sense to me. Joe Goldberg tried his hand at arson, and I'm supposed to be okay with that. And then he met her, fell in love with her, and still didn't tell her that he set her house on fire and permanently mutilated her. I don't know, guys. Me personally, that's just not my type of guy. But hey, I just might have high standards. Next, I feel like would make sense as a worst book of 2024 that I read, and I read Unhinged by Vera Valentine, correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. This is a 70-page book that I read on Kindle Unlimited about a girl's door that comes to life after she gets jiggy with it. And then they continue to get jiggy. And then, yeah. And guys, can I actually be honest with you? I did actually enjoy the book. It was a very entertaining book. I did have a lot of fun with those 70 pages. I read it in about 10 minutes. But, objectively, literarily speaking, a terrible book. You know, did I give it 1 star? Yes. Would I read it again? Absolutely, yes. Would I recommend it to anyone? Not in your brightest dreams, babe. Not in your wildest dreams. So essentially, this girl is being stalked by her landlord, and she's kind of worried about it. And a few girls have gone missing, etc. I can't remember the minute details about stuff like that. And one day, I can't remember why, but I think she got it in her head, or she had a dream that her door was talking to her, and her door was trying to protect her from this man. And so she was like, okay, here we go. So she wraps up the doorknob, does a thing with the doorknob, and bada bing, bada boom. Bada bing, bada boom. Next few hours, he's awake in human form. Bada bing, bada boom. And then what do? They bada bing, bada boom. Again. And then do you want to know a really funny scene? In a scene where he's protecting her from the landlord, because apparently that was true. He actually was speaking to her. He's protecting her from the landlord, who's now snuck into her house and is trying to drug her. The landlord kind of punches him. He hits his head, turns back into a door. And you take your wildest guess how she brings him back to human form. Next up, we've got The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Again, correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but this book...
I hate it so much! I hate it!
This book... Let's talk about all of the reasons that I really just did not enjoy this book and would never in my life recommend it to anyone whatsoever in the entirety of my existence. Within the first 10 pages, I counted between 30 and 40 M dashes. I am not going to give an exact number because I can't remember right now. For those of you that don't know what an M dash is, it's one of those sort of elongated hyphens that we use, and they do have some very valid uses within grammar, within syntax, within semantics, etc., etc., etc. But in this book, it was being used in place of a normal M dash, in place of a comma, in place of a full stop, in place of a colon, in place of a semicolon. It was just... I think he discovered an M dash and thought, you know what, I like this. M dash, M dash. And it just drove me insane, because there were 90% of the times just did not need an em dash. 90% of the times could have absolutely functioned with no punctuation whatsoever, or a comma or a full stop. 99% of the time, it did not need an em dash, and it just really bothered me that they were there all the time. Second of all, hated the characters. Hated everything about the characters. They were unbelievably, crucially, painfully two-dimensional. Very two-dimensional characters. I didn't feel any depth to them. I didn't feel any excitingness to them. I didn't feel anything unique about them. Okay, cool, the main character paints. Okay. That's about it. That's about the only personalized character traits you've given to any of the characters whatsoever. So here's a top tip. If you want people to like your characters, maybe make your characters likable. I didn't like them. Plot twist, predictable. In my opinion, again, maybe that's just because, you know, I studied books like this at university sometimes, where we are taught to notice the foreshadowing, taught to notice all of this. Maybe I am just a bit more privileged, but predictable. And also, I just feel like if a plot twist at the end of the book is the only thing that makes your book good, probably not a very good book. That's all I really have to say. Gearing up to number 5, it is Get in My Swamp by GM Fairy, which is one of the first reading vlogs I ever posted on this account ever. And now, this is very much like Unhinged in the sense of, was it a 1-star read? Absolutely. Would I read it again? Absolutely. Would I recommend it to anyone else? Absolutely not. It's just that type of book. I had so much fun reading it, and genuinely, if I look back, you know, just at my year, and I think of what is the book I had the most fun reading, it would be this book. But objectively speaking, literature speaking, I should just delete my account at this point. Literarily speaking, you know, grammatically speaking, good book, not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. Enjoyable book, absolutely. Absolutely, but it's still top 5 worst books I've read in comparison and in relation to the other books that I read this year. But Get in My Swamp, an ogre love story by GM Fairy. What else can I say? You know, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You can watch the video yourself. Absolutely hilarious book. Absolutely hilarious book. I don't think that the author wants to be funny, but single-handedly one of the funniest books I've ever read in my entire life. Very much enjoyed it, actually. I know I said that this would be the top 6 worst books of the year, but I actually think the book that I was going to mention as the 6th, I won't, do you know what, I'll still talk about it, but I won't mention it as, like, my top worst books. I'm going to stick it to top 5 worst books of the year, but I will talk about this, because now I realise the book itself, not bad, you know, the story itself, not bad, it's just the way that it was marketed to me, and that's White Nights by Dostoevsky. And the issue that I had with this book is I went into it based on peer reviews, based on video reviews, TikTok reviews, YouTube reviews, Goodreads reviews, article reviews, thinking that this is going to be a book that truly redefines love for me, that redefines romance for me. And I went into this book and it was just, you know, a man who's 10 years older than the female main character, who met her when she was vulnerable and sad and crying and just sort of took advantage of that, became incredibly hyperfixated on her for 3 days, and then got really angry and heartbroken when she decided to go for the person that she was pining for and in love with for over a year. It just, to me, read as a story about obsession rather than love, but when I take a step back and I really remember the parts of the story that I did enjoy, it was all of the parts that truly explored the human nature, you know, depression, being a dreamer, you know, dissociation, stuff like that. I think Dostoevsky did that fantastically. I think that if that had been advertised to me about a story about the human psyche, a story about human nature, I would have thoroughly enjoyed it far more than I did when people advertised it to me as a romance, because I went into that romance with my eyes just sort of bugging at the page like, what the am I reading? You know what I mean? So I'm not going to put it up there with the top worst books of the year, but I'm just going to mention it because I'm not going to talk about it again until I do like my full reading wrap up, and I will say the same thing. But yeah, that's I think that the downfall of that book was the way that it had been discussed publicly rather than the actual book itself. But that's the top 5 worst books I read this year. Can't wait to see you again for the top 5 best books. Okay, love you, bye.